The borderline male has only existed as a concept in recent years. For a long time, it was thought that borderline personality disorder, or BPD, was a female disorder and was diagnosed predominantly in women. This led to ignoring a serious mental health problem in men, with serious consequences for their entire existence. Personality disorders differ from other mental disorders in that they are long-lasting and stable over time. In the case of a depressive disorder, there is a clear onset and a clear, staged course of the disorder. Personality disorders are persistent. They appear once the personality has become more definitive during late adolescence. The Diagnostic Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM, defines personality disorders as a pattern of inner life and behavior that deviates significantly from the expectations of the culture of the person concerned. Borderline disorder is defined as a pattern of instability in interpersonal relationships, self-image and feelings, and marked impulsivity. The DSM also mentions that the disorder is diagnosed in 75% of women. This represents a major gender discrepancy. It is found in only a few other psychiatric conditions, such as histrionic or antisocial personality disorder. Recent research shows, however, that this sex difference is not due to a constitutional predisposition of women to this disorder. It is only the case in other conditions such as breast cancer or autoimmune diseases. It is due exclusively to errors in the way these calculations are made. Why are more women diagnosed with borderline? Wrong choice of population for these statistics. Studies that indicate a higher rate of BPD in women are mostly done in psychiatric clinics. Here, generally, women are the majority population. They seek psychiatric care much more frequently than men. When the general population is assessed, as in a Norwegian study, there are no relevant gender differences. Another study in 2009, which collected data from 34,000 adults in the general population, found once again the following obvious fact. There is no significant difference between the rate of BPD in men and women. According to this study, 6.2% of women and 5.6% of men met the criteria for the diagnosis. So the difference between the two sexes is just over 0.5%. They may have sexist preconceptions and stereotypes about female behavior and what constitutes pathological behavior in women versus men. One such example is the promiscuous behavior criterion. Men are less likely to be considered promiscuous if they sleep with many women than vice versa, despite the women's sexual liberation movements of the second feminist wave. The criteria of intense and inappropriate rage is highly subjective. The cultural expectation of women in patriarchal societies is to never express anger in public. In men, it is a common manifestation, even a sign of masculinity. Thus, a woman's angry outburst is more likely to be interpreted as pathological, whereas in men it is underestimated. Last but not least, the simple assumption by physicians that women are more prone to BPD, and that in men it is somewhat rare. It may lead them to diagnose this disorder more often in female patients than in male patients. All this leads to an underdiagnosis of borderline personality disorder in men, which ultimately results in their reduced access to appropriate treatment. BPD is a disorder that affects a person's entire existence, especially the relational sphere. It is particularly important for quality of life. If borderline men do not get the right diagnosis, then they cannot get the help they need to lead a balanced life. That is why it is extremely important to recognize the signs for the borderline man and help him in the therapeutic process. The borderline male, traits in common with women. A 1990 study found that when students are asked to label borderline symptoms as masculine or feminine, almost all of them, except anger, are interpreted as intrinsically feminine. Thus, borderline is a stereotypically female disorder, at least in the way it is presented in the DSM. This does not mean, however, that it occurs only in women. The researchers may have overemphasized the female-specific manifestations and ignored those specific to the borderline male. The basic traits are common to both sexes: fear of abandonment, impulsivity, self-harm, relational and self-instability. But they can manifest very differently, due to the distinct way boys and girls are raised and taught to behave. Main manifestations of borderline in men. The borderline man, fear of abandonment. Like women, men experience an acute fear of abandonment, which they try to avoid at all costs. While in women this manifests itself in the form of clinging to and overdependence on their partner, in men it is more likely to be reflected in an exacerbated possessiveness and a desire to control their partner. What he does in his free time, what friends he has, his relationships with his family, how he dresses or makes up. This behavior can lead to alienation of the couple and lock them into a toxic relationship, prone to abuse and domestic violence. The fear of abandonment is the main force that guides the behavior of men with BPD in relation to others. In the beginning, they tend to be conquerors and polite. But when the relationship seems to be going well, they tend to self-sabotage because of the belief that they cannot trust anyone and that abandonment is inevitable. So they start to behave chaotically and unpredictably, sometimes even violently. The other person is extremely confused, not understanding what caused the 180-degree change, suspecting that the man with BPD was faking it at first. He is not inauthentic, however. His behavior is a defense mechanism of which he is usually unaware himself. Both the initially distressed person and the unpredictable, aggressive man coexist within himself, taking control at different stages of the relationship. When they sense the danger of being abandoned, often imagined, they take the reins in order to be in control and break the relationship before their partner has a chance to do so. Thus, they may resort to gestures such as cheating on their partner, threatening to leave, or violent behavior. The effects of fear of abandonment. This behavior leads to a history of intense but unstable relationships that burn out quickly. The same applies not only to romantic relationships but also to friendships and family relationships. If someone close to them causes them to feel offended, they are likely to break off the relationship abruptly. During therapy sessions, they may lose their temper and feel rejected if they detect fear in the psychotherapist, which may be a misinterpretation of the therapist's reaction. So, they stop coming to therapy. Lack of healthy, stable relationships is both a symptom and a debilitating factor in the lives of men with BPD. In the absence of a support system, they become increasingly self-destructive, and the other manifestations of the disorder become more pronounced. The borderline man, violent behavior. Studies show that borderline men have more explosive tempers than women with the same diagnosis. This may be because, well, culturally, such outbursts are more tolerated in men than in women. Women have superior emotional intelligence and are better able to control and adapt their behavior to circumstances. There may be genetic and/or physiological sex differences that predispose men with BPD to aggressive behavior, but not enough is yet known about these aspects. Whatever the reasons, aggression seems to be a more common trait in borderline men than in women. This, combined with impulsive behavior, explains why borderline traits are so common among prisoners. A 2010 U.S. study found that 41.6% of incarcerated men included in the research and 52.1% of women met the criteria for a BPD diagnosis. This percentage is shocking. It is extremely high compared to the rate of BPD in the general population, which is around 1%. The study also suggests that they are not supported by society and help to overcome their difficulties and lead a balanced life. They are punished for their behavior and abandoned in prisons. This is where most often criminal behavior gets worse. Men's anger often goes unrecognized by the medical and social community. It is blamed on an anger management problem. They may be recommended anger management courses. So, things are allowed to get out of control and these men do not get the specialized help they need. The borderline man, substance use. The borderline man has an increased risk of developing addictions compared to the borderline woman. Addiction aggravates impulsive and violent behavior. This can mask the underlying distress, and it is quite common for men to seek treatment services for substance control rather than borderline. They become diagnosed during rehabilitation. Other signs of BPD in men include exaggerated jealousy, extremely sensitive to criticism and responds aggressively when insulted or blamed, tends to idealize other people immediately but becomes disappointed almost as quickly, and then openly expresses contempt for them, has an extremely volatile mood. He crosses the spectrum of emotions in an extremely rapid and shocking way to those around him, who do not notice the triggers for these changes. He is extremely irritable and prone to episodes of explosive rage. People perceive him as hostile and unfriendly, intimidating, even frightening. He compensates for feelings of inadequacy with risky, dangerous behavior. Risky behavior can manifest itself in dangerous driving, resulting in tickets and frequent traffic accidents or incidents. Excessive consumption of substances like alcohol and drugs that can lead to acute intoxication such as alcoholic coma or overdose. Provoking other men into physical confrontations, resulting in injuries. Seeking various other dangerous activities such as extreme sports or illegal activities, such as theft or burglary. Suicidal and parasuicidal behavior, like self-harm, self-mutilation by burning, cutting, kicking walls or windows, is also common. BPD has a high suicide rate, and suicide in men has a higher rate than in women. So the borderline male has an exacerbated risk of taking his own life. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Till next time, take care of you or find someone who does.